Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our March monthly member meeting. So for those of you that are guests, welcome. We allow guests to attend once, and the rest of you that are members, I already see people doing what they need to be doing. So thank you. We need you to rename yourself in the tag and make sure that if you are a member, you put member first and then your name. And if you're a guest, you put guest first and then your name, because at the end of today's amazing presentation, you are broken out into different groups for networking, and the members stay together, and then the guests stay with me in the main room. So for anybody that is new to NADP, what we want to do is explain a little bit about what we are. And what we are is an online and in-person platform that unites 4 different industries: legal, financial, mental health, and real estate industries, for the purpose of you being able to connect, communicate with each other, collaborate, and ultimately have access to B2B education that you normally would not have when it comes to your divorcing clients. At the end of the day, we want you to be able to provide the best possible service to your clients, because you are so important to the process. You know, divorce is very difficult. It's extremely challenging, very hard to change legislatively or judicially. As many of the attorneys on here know, there's only so much control that they have as well. But what you do have control is what kind of service you provide your clients and how much you're doing to make that a better service, because the journey can be better. So I thank you all for being here today. A few housekeeping items. You can always open up the chat box and ask questions there. Or if you need any help, we have Cybele here on the back end, and she's making sure that she is vigilant of what's going on. And also, you are going to be able to save the chat. So go ahead and put your name and your profession and where you're from in there, so that when this meeting ends, it should save to your computer and you can reach out to anybody that you feel would be a valuable connection. As I say every month, this is not about spamming and taking that list and adding them onto your newsletter. It's about really seeing who would be a good connection for you, someone that would be valuable to add to your team of referrals or resources. And I think that that's pretty much all I have to share with you today, other than I'm very excited about our presentation. And Nicole is going to be giving you a little updates and also introducing our fabulous presenter.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. And I just want to announce what we have going on. Also this week is on Thursday, we are having a return of our Zoom speed networking event. That's from 12 to 1 o'clock. You can come on and we break you out into groups of 2 and you can network with one another. And it's been a lot of fun. And those that have attended have really enjoyed it. And next month, just to let you know, the monthly member meeting Ed Talk is going to be navigating real estate and mortgage challenges in divorce settlements. So that should be very interesting. We also have a marketing workshop next month, a returning marketing expert, and she's going to be talking about the art of guiding prospects from interested to invested. She and I had a long talk about how professionals are not always good salespeople, and she's going to give you some tips on how to convert those clients. So check all of those out, coming soon. And let's now introduce Carolyn. We're really excited for this presentation. Carolyn Walsh Parry is a settlement-focused family law attorney in New York City. She's handling divorces, mediations, and matrimony agreements, such as prenups and postnuptial agreements. She has both a professional and personal association with family law, and uses her unique perspective to settle matrimony disputes with reasonability and fairness. So I'm not going to say any more. Carolyn, will let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is a great turnout. So yes, again, I'm Carolyn Parry. I'm in New York City. I am a low conflict, settlement-focused divorce attorney and mediator. I do try to keep my clients out of court. Doesn't always happen. But one way to keep people out of court is a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement. So I know that most people here are probably not going through a divorce. I don't know. I'm assuming that most of you are in a trusted position where you give advice to clients. And so I really would like to educate more people about a postnuptial agreement. It's a great planning tool. And it's a great way to protect one or both spouses in a marriage from different financial circumstances that happen, because life throws you different circumstances and we need to be prepared for it. So, you know, most people understand the prenup, okay? But they have never heard of a postnuptial agreement, you know, don't really get it. Why do we need it? Is this for people who are going through a divorce? And it is not. The point of a matrimonial agreement is to make sure that if there is a divorce, there should be less fighting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can go ahead. Okay. And if you have questions, I'm gonna just go through it. But if you have questions, please put it in the chat. And then I will, once I'm done, I will go back and look at the questions and answer them. So, you know, we'll just go through it first, and then we can certainly go back at any point. So postnuptial agreements, what are they? And when, really it should be, when does your client need one? And I would like people not to leave the workforce without a postnuptial. So prenuptial, what happened? Okay. So a prenuptial agreement is a marital agreement that is made before a couple gets married. And the leverage here is that you're not getting married without this agreement. Okay. So, and nobody is required to sign one, but it's, you know, if you don't sign it, you're not getting married. And the purpose of, as most marital agreements, is to define what is marital assets, joint assets, and what are separate assets. Because separate assets are kept by an individual in a divorce. Marital assets are split. Okay. So then, what is a prenup? A postnup, sorry. Okay, there we go. So a postnuptial agreement is again a marital agreement made by a couple after they've gotten married. And again, it defines what assets should be distributed, what assets are separate. And we can also look at, you know, maybe spousal support, alimony as well. So the trigger for a postnuptial agreement is, you know, these things. I'm going to go over each one of them individually. I'm going to give you real examples that I have worked on, but normally there is something, a change in circumstances in the marriage, and you know what that change is, and you know how big of a change, you know, really depends on the couple. But you know, in most circumstances, a change is going to cause a financial change as well, and that's when the a postnup, you know, could really benefit, you know, anybody who's going through this change. Okay. So as I said, when you're going through a divorce, you know, you know, we're trying to decide what's mine, what's yours, what's ours. And a prenup, a postnup clarifies that. It should make a divorce simpler, in that we're saying, okay, we don't have to fight about this. We know what it is. And again, it's really crucial that there's a real definition about the character of that property, because if it is separate property, it is not on the table to be divided during a divorce. But a joint asset, a marital asset, a combined asset, whatever you call it, is going to be split. So, you know, and it can be very hard, you know, to know what was separate. If it's a long marriage, sure. If it's a 3-year marriage, okay, you can probably go back and get records. So I'll give you an example of a case that I'm working on right now. It's an over 30-year marriage. And the husband is claiming that there's an account that has about $400,000 in it, is a separate premarital account. That's a big deal. That's a lot of money. We're not talking about a couple $100. Like, that's a lot of money. So to be able to show what's separate and marital is a big deal. Now, what he was claiming is that he had an account, and he never touched it. He had this account, and it just grew over the marriage, but now he's got to claim it. The presumption is, as you all know, is that if something is earned, acquired, obtained during the marriage, it's presumed to be marital. If you are making a separate property claim, you have the burden to show that it is your separate property. Now, again, if you got married a year, 2 years ago, that's easy. You're going to be able to go back, and get those bank records or whatever sort of checks, whatever, pretty easily. For this guy, it was very difficult. There was no prenup. And his attorney had to subpoena bank records going back. And, then one bank merged with another bank and one bank went out of business and he rolled things into another account. He did prove it. And again, had he been my client, I would have moved hell on earth to prove that, because it was such a significant claim. But that's what's helpful about a prenup or a postnup, is that at least you're stating on paper, this is what is separate. And I don't have to prove it at some point down the line. It is just done. Okay. It is in the agreement. It's a done deal. Okay. So we know that this is separate. This is marital. I'm in New York. In New York, when we divide marital assets, we do it equitably. We have equitable distribution. That doesn't mean equal. We default to equal. It's usually equal, but we default, it's called equitable. I think California is equal. So what is equitable distribution? And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because really we're talking about postnups. But again, the purpose of the postnup, of a prenup, is to determine what each party will get to an extent in a divorce. So in New York, again, we are equitable, we're not equal. That means that somebody in a marriage can try to make a claim to say, I should get more of this marital asset, or my spouse should get less of this marital asset, for various reasons. So, the biggest one that I see is number 12, the wasteful dissipation of assets. If one spouse has engaged in an activity like gambling, cheating, drugs, and the other spouse has not consented to it, that, let's say, non-cheating spouse can make a claim for 50% of whatever that person spent, because that was 50% that was marital money that they've spent, and they're entitled to 50% of it. So if one spouse spent $100,000 on secret gambling, the non-gambling spouse would be entitled to a $50,000 credit against the assets. How about like loss of health insurance? Maybe somebody has a chronic disease, really needs very good quality health insurance, and they're saying, I'm losing my free health insurance on this divorce that you want. So I'm going to have to spend it. So I maybe should get more of this checking account because I need the money more. So it's, someone can always make that claim that they should be getting more or less. Someone transfers some sort of an asset because they know that they're going to get divorced. They sell their brother a house for $1 or something. Well, that's kind of a waste of assets. Okay. So now let's get to a postnuptial agreement, why you should be recommending it for your clients. What are the different reasons why a postnuptial agreement, would come into play, how it happens, and when you should recommend it. And again, your client doesn't have to necessarily be looking for a divorce. Like when you sell someone a life insurance policy, you're not planning on them dying early. You're not, but it's an insurance policy, right? It's just in case something happens. And that's probably how you should present a postnup. Because, a prenup has sort of an ugly connotation, I think. Oh, you're already planning for divorce. We haven't even gotten married. And the postnup obviously can be seen in the same way. Oh, you're planning for a divorce. We're not necessarily planning for a divorce, but something has happened. And, you're saying, I'm serving you, you're my client. I'm trying to do the best for you. I want you to be okay in case something happens. So this is another tool that can be done. So if you have, I know in divorces, when we have a divorce and we have, let's say dad has certain financial obligations to mom, child support, paying for college, whatever. We'll usually ask dad or require dad to get a life insurance policy, just in case something happens to dad that, that would cover his financial circumstances, just in case he dies. Now, again, we're not saying, dad, you're going to die, but what we're saying is, just in case something happens. So these are some of the reasons. I neglected to put in a big reason, starting a business. That should be in there. But I will discuss that, and we will go through all of these. Okay. Okay. This is the reason I would like people to get postnuptial agreements. Leaving the workforce. It's not always women, it's usually women. And how many of you have heard someone say, well, my salary is X and childcare costs Y, and they're basically the same, so it's a wash, so I'm just going to stay home. I am not suggesting that anybody not stay home with their children. If it's something that's very important to you to do, wonderful. You should absolutely do it. But just understand that when you are making a decision to leave the workforce for any reason, and the most common is to care for children, so I'm going to use that as my example, but for any reason, understand that that is a massive, massive financial decision that your client is making. And again, they shouldn't do something that has financial consequences without being very smart about it, without really thinking about it, without really preparing for it. So, when someone says, well, my salary is this and childcare costs this, I'm like, no, that's not true, because childcare is for the working spouse to work also, right? It's not just for you to stay home. It's for both of you. It's the combined income is a lot more than what the childcare costs. But okay, you want to stay home, great. Understand that when you leave the workforce, you are obviously you're losing income. Okay, and that's the obvious one. Less obvious is that your client is losing the opportunity to get raises, to make lateral moves, to get, to make more money. Your client is losing other types of income, such as deferred compensation, like bonuses, stocks, options, whatever. Your client is losing maybe retirement funds if the place that they're leaving had a 401k program, or again, they might leave their current job to go to a different job that has a 401k, maybe a pension, other sorts of benefits like that. They're also losing the skills in that industry. And that's, and that can be hard. I want you to think about your own jobs right now. And if you were to leave your job today, voluntarily, for a wonderful reason, and then if you tried to go back in 5 years, would you be able to? You might not, because you might have lost some of the knowledge and the skill that you need to be current in your industry. You also lose connections. Like right now, if maybe if you did want to get another job or you had a question, you could probably call up somebody. Could you still do that in 10 years from now? Maybe not. So it's a massive economic loss, and a postnup is a great idea for somebody who's, again, leaving the workforce for any reason. Nobody does this, which is why I like to scream it from the rooftops. Don't leave the workforce without a postnup. A postnup can really help the person who's leaving compensate for this sacrifice, because it's a big sacrifice that they're making, and it's not really acknowledged how much of a sacrifice is being made by leaving the workforce. Some of the things that we could do in a postnup to compensate is maybe in the event of a divorce, working spouse has to pay for a career coach, a LinkedIn specialist, somebody who helps with resumes. Maybe instead of that, if somebody is coming into the marriage with a 401k, and some of it is, and we're claiming some of it is separate property. Well, how about none of it is separate property? How about it all be part of the marital pot? Because this other person who is sacrificing to stay home and leave the workforce is not earning, anything in their 401k or whatever. It can be creative. It can be, it can just be really important to kind of, let working spouse know, listen, this is a sacrifice and it needs to be acknowledged. It also starts a conversation. Working spouse may really not want to be the primary breadwinner. Working spouse may, once they're actually signing their name to black and white, they might kind of go, oh, we're actually talking about, you're actually making me sign something. I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't support this. And so, no, I'm not going to compensate you. For instance, if you are in a 10-year marriage, at least in New York, we have a statutory period of time for which you are entitled to receive spousal support. And so for a 10-year marriage, it's 15 to 30% of the length of the marriage. So a 10-year marriage, you're entitled to 3 years of spousal support. Again, I want you to think about your own position that you're in right now as whatever it is that you do. If you were to leave your workforce, if you were to leave your job and then try to go back in 10 years, would 3 years of spousal support be enough time for you to kind of get back on your feet, to get back to where you are now? Probably not. So if working spouse or working outside the home spouse really is supportive of this decision, well, then is working spouse willing to say, okay, we will ignore the statutory amount of time, and instead you'll get spousal support for 50% of the length of the time, 100% of the length of the time, 75% of the length of the time that you have been out of the workforce. If you've been out for 10 years, you're going to get 7 years of spousal support, something like that. So it's, it is something to really, really think about. And again, if you have clients and you hear them say, yeah, I'm going to be leaving the workforce to do something, whatever it is, I want that to be a red flag to you. And I want you to say, you're probably assuming that the court is going to take care of you, like you're doing something noble. You're leaving to take care of children, and the court is really going to recognize that and reward you for that. No, they're not. They will not. They're going to say, who told you to do it? You were an accountant who told you to leave. So it can come as a shock to people that that the court will not take care of them or recognize them in certain ways. Okay. I've had a lot of post-nups for, just a nefarious action. I'm friends with somebody who is an elder in Gamblers Anonymous. So he was sending me a bunch of gamblers who, had managed to, I guess, get sober, get clean. But the destruction that they left in their wake with their marriage was very serious. And so whether it's a gambling, it's addiction, it's infidelity, whatever it is, it's a massive, massive disruption in the marriage. It's a loss of faith, but usually these actions have a financial component to them. I had one client that did, she had an affair, and, and her husband found out, and he obviously wanted a divorce. And I said, well, how much did you spend on this affair? And she said, oh, well, nothing. He was rich. He bought me everything. I was like, great. Then in that case, the affair really, it's of no consequence because we are no fault. So therefore, as long as you weren't spending money on it. But here, so let's take gambling as an example. And so I was representing the gambler, and he had spent so much money that the wife didn't know about. He gambled away the children's 529 accounts. Like his addiction was really terrible. So what they did is they had a post-nup where, she just got the house free and clear in a divorce. She didn't have to buy him out. She didn't have to prove anything. Now, let me explain something that you need to know to tell your clients. if your client has gone through this type of a disruption where somebody has spent money and they say, but you know what, but I don't want to lose my marriage. We're going to try. We're going to keep trying. We're going to keep working at it. You consent to whatever you don't object to. So your spouse, has spent however much money on drugs. Okay. And then, okay, they're going to go to rehab and we're going to work on it, whatever. And they've spent $25,000, on a drug addiction. But you guys, stay together and you work on it. And 5 years later, yeah, you know what, we just never recovered from that. You can try to get the credit, half of that 25,000, but it's not going to be quite as automatic, because in a sense, your client consented to it because they stayed in the marriage. They didn't say, oh my God, you spent $25,000 on what? I'm out right now. That's very clearly saying, I do not consent to this amount of money being spent. So, a postnup could sort of help preserve that objection, to say, okay, this person spent, $25,000. And that's just, it's undisputed. If there is a divorce, I am entitled to, whatever it is, 12,000, whatever half of 25 is, credit against whatever assets we have. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to go back and show records. That's just it. This is what it is. Or, again, and I will be getting X asset as, as sort of my, as compensation to me, to make up for what, this thing that was done. And again, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Now, an unexpected financial windfall. This I've also had a few of these. I'll start actually with the personal injury award. I'm friends with the personal injury attorney, and he's definitely called me up to say, okay, my guy is about to get a big settlement. And he's also engaged. I think he could use a prenup, as well as structured settlement and a financial advisor and, everything else. Because this is somebody who is, blue collar, never had millions of dollars in their life. And, but also this person's about to receive, a big settlement. They're married. He doesn't know that he's going to stay in the marriage. He's, or even if he's happily married, that personal injury award should really remain with the person who received it. Now, if you get a personal injury award, it's usually for pain and suffering, and that is separate property. However, most personal injury awards, not all, but most, have a lost income component to them. And income is always marital. So yes, your client's spouse could make a claim, on that award. So again, your client's about to come into some money from something like that. Especially if it's a lost wage claim, like a discrimination claim, they're going to get an award. A postnuptial is a great tool for them. Now let's talk about an inheritance. And again, I've had real life situations in a divorce where the inheritance, part of the inheritance was claimed by a spouse. When you receive an inheritance, or your client receives an inheritance, that is separate property. However, your client is happily married. They have no reason to think that they would be getting a divorce anytime soon. They take that inheritance and they deposit it into a joint checking account, a joint investment account, a jointly titled asset like a home. What they have done now is taken separate property and converted it to marital property. They've transmuted it by commingling it. Okay, so they have now changed that nature of the inheritance. So again, somebody gets an inheritance, it's a great idea to get a postnuptial agreement, just to be able to say, listen, I'm fine, I'm going to put it into our home and we can renovate. But if there's ever a divorce, I want a dollar for dollar credit. So one of the situations that I had was, it was a home that my client inherited. And it was a vacation home, on the Cape, and her husband used it for years. The children used it. You know, so it was joint use of this. It was in, you know, it was in her name, but there was joint use. They put marital money into this vacation home to renovate it, to fix it up. They did a HELOC. So yeah, he had a claim. He had a claim for a percentage, you know, of that, of the value of that home. And he was certainly entitled to it. So again, a postnup, just to say, listen, that's fine. We're gonna spend my inheritance. We're gonna use it, but should things go south, it needs to be known that this is separate property. My grandmother left that for me, or something like that. Or it's in a trust, and a trust is separate property anyway, but you know, if the trust is paying out a big amount, then a postnup is a great idea. I'm going to include in here, because I should have included it in the slides, and I really apologize, starting a business, because that in a way is a financial windfall. If you start a business during a marriage, that could be considered, and usually is considered, a marital asset. So you might have a situation where 3 people start a business, and then at some point, due to a divorce, you now have an ex who has a percentage of the business. And I don't think that that's anything that anybody wants. You're not thinking about it at the time, but it's just not something that anybody wants. I've actually done this for a company. Everybody who gets an equity share in this particular company with stocks, whatever, they have, in order to get that, they have to enter into a postnup with their spouse, or a prenup, if you know, whatever, if they're not married, that says that that company, that those shares, that the equity, and will never be a marital asset. If I were the attorney for the spouse who's not getting that part of the company, I'd say, oh, okay, well then compensate me in some other way. If I'm not getting any part of this company, then I want the marital home free and clear, or something. Or we're going to figure out what the company is worth, and then I get that in some other thing. But yes, your shares, your whatever is all you. So definitely keep that in mind. If you're somebody who deals with people who are starting businesses, definitely say, you know, you might want to think about a postnup. And if everybody in the company is getting a postnup, then it doesn't hurt quite as badly to say, well, everybody is doing it. It's not just you, honey. Everybody is required to do this. Okay, so here's some other reasons that I've dealt with. I've had situations where people have a prenup because they're getting married maybe a little bit sooner than they wanted to, you know, usually for immigration reasons. I've had prenups that were so restrictive. It's like, we're getting married, but you get absolutely nothing. It's basically as if we were never married. It's all mine, mine, mine. And I kind of wonder why these people, you know, actually get married. But then let's say you have a 10-year wedding anniversary, and you realize, okay, this person is not in it just for the money. They, you know, your client realizes it's a good marriage. This person really loves them. They've stuck through them through thick and thin. So maybe a postnup to kind of maybe share a few more things. Maybe, you know, maybe they had a home that was premarital, but you know, the spouses lived there for a certain period of time. The children live there, you know, and your client realizes, you know, I do want to take care of this person. And it's really not fair that if we get divorced, he or she doesn't get anything from this. I'm going to put the house in their name, or in both of our names, or something. So the postnup can be used to be generous, to show that there's maybe some staying power. You know, another thing, what if you have, you know, a couple of 25-year-olds who have nothing? They're both one's in law school, one's in medical school. They're up to their eyeballs in debt. They don't make anything, but now it's 20 years later and they're both very successful. Again, as I said, that medical practice, that law firm, whatever, are assets in a marriage. Maybe they'd like to use a postnup to say, okay, neither one of us touches the other one's business. It's okay, we'll divide everything else 50-50, but the businesses, because I don't want to have to go through a business evaluation, which is expensive. I don't want to have to even think about that. We just know that neither one of us is touching the business. A special needs child. Now, this is something that's also unpredictable. Nobody intends to have a special needs child, but sometimes it happens. Aside from being, emotionally devastating, it has financial consequences as well. And many times there's one parent that becomes the primary caregiver. And as we said, somebody leaving the workforce, and all the things that go with leaving the workforce, because, they just can't do it. They can't have a full-time job or a part-time job and still deal with all of the care that their child needs. So let's say, you have your client has a special needs child. It's a 10-year marriage. Okay, you get 3 years of spousal support. That doesn't seem very fair, considering that this person, is going to be taking care of this child maybe forever, or maybe until the child is 18 and can get, something, whatever. You might have a parent saying, well, hold on, you're getting, disability benefits. I shouldn't have to pay child support. There's a lot of issues that can come up. They could be dealt with at a time when the parents are not going through the conflict of a divorce, not going through the strain of a divorce. So again, if you have a client with a special needs child, definitely something to think about. Okay. I had a client who, it was only a 6-year marriage, but during the marriage, she developed, it was a benign but inoperable brain tumor. And it hindered her ability to work. And it was an ugly litigation about how much spousal support she should get and for how long, and for keeping her health care in place. And it was an extended, terrible litigation. And that's what we're trying to avoid, with doing a marital agreement. We're trying to avoid going to court and litigation. So again, if you know somebody that has a disabled, your client's disabled, or has some sort of a medical condition, something to think about. There are other things I'm sure that you would advise, long-term care insurance, whatever, but a post-nup is definitely something to consider as well. Now, this last reason, negotiating a divorce while you're still in an amicable relationship, I've had this many, many times. Okay, and it's a few reasons. One, you're not really ready, for the big D. You're like, things are not going well, but you're not ready to go there. And for a divorce, but things are not good. So it's like, okay, the post-nup is sort of a way to dip your toe into the divorce realm. Like, if we were to get a divorce, then we would do this, and you can basically settle your entire divorce, in your post-nup. But also, let's say you have or you feel guilty, you don't want to just rip the Band-Aid off immediately, so you go, oh, let's do a post-nup and still work on the marriage. It doesn't rise to the level of fraud. It is disingenuous, it is underhanded, but it's not at that level that it would make the agreement moot. Because you said, well, I want to go to therapy, I want to work on the marriage, but really I'm just trying to settle this divorce. What if you're in a relationship with someone, married to someone who is very aggressive, or, whatever, and the type of person that has to win? Okay. So as soon as you say, I want a divorce, this person is out to win. They are not going to negotiate. They are not going to settle. They are, I'd rather pay my attorney than pay that bitch a dime, like that kind of a personality. A post-nup might be good. And the leverage there is, look, I'm really unhappy with the marriage, but I'd be willing to work on this marriage if you agree to enter into a post-nup, because that will show me that you're really serious about this. So it is a way to negotiate this while you're still okay with each other, we're still amicable, while you still have this person who kind of maybe wants something from you, which is, to keep the marriage going. And again, I have seen this a lot, but again, I wish that people really knew more about the post-nups and how it could really be helpful, as a great planning tool, as a great, again, protecting somebody who is in, who's had a change in life or financial circumstances. And, life circumstances usually equal to change in financial circumstances, not always, but it can equal that. So again, I want people to really know how these postnups can be really can aid your clients, can really help them, can really protect them, you know, in many ways. So that's it. I see there's stuff in the chat. I don't know if there are questions yet. Nicole?
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. That was great information. And I've been keeping an eye on the chat, but I'm going to read, let's see. Okay, I'm going to start with the first one from Melissa. Is there a reason for pre and post nuptials?
Is there a reason for them? Well, yes, because you know, should there be a divorce, then it's you do not have to go through heavy litigation. Things are already decided beforehand. That is the absolute reason to have a marital agreement, to avoid litigation in the future.
Right. So it's sort of, I think that's your question, Melissa. It's sort of like, why do you need it? And I think sometimes also in the moment while you have all the documentation and it's clear and you're talking about it, as opposed to waiting till the end when there's maybe multiple issues and then it's more mayhem, right? I mean, that's sort of, to me, kind of.
Absolutely. And as I was saying, the example of the guy who had the $400,000 account he was able to, it was a separate account. But again, good luck trying to get bank records 10 years later, 15 years later, whatever. It's very difficult.
Right. Would you mind, Carolyn, just taking off this your PowerPoint just so that I can see everyone's faces in case they have questions?
Okay.
Great. Melissa, did you want to add? I see you wrote something after. She says, I'm talking about a case for both. So do you want to clarify what you mean by that, Melissa? Go ahead.
I have a client who is getting married. She's young. She's watched a terrible divorce between parents, and she wants a prenup because the house that they're living in currently is in her name. And if she gets married, she doesn't want it to become a marital asset. So she is wanting to do a prenup. But would there be and it's a little concerning because she's so young. I just can't even believe that she's this astute. So I think she's brilliant and told her as much. But
I'm sorry.
but you know, would it be also a consideration to recommend her to kind of watch his spending and everything? I think that's her concern going into the marriage, is his frantic spending to do a postnup after the wedding as well.
Well, the prenup is fantastic for saying, here's this asset that I have that I always want it to be mine, because something like a house, it is way too easy to start commingling money if he's putting, you know, money in to renovate, or he's paying the mortgage or something like that. So definitely his spending. Yeah, I mean, I suppose you know, if he's spending on a joint credit card, if he's not paying taxes, if he's doing, then yeah, a postnup would be great to sort of account for his recklessness.
So so I guess my question is, and I'm not asking it very well, and I apologize. So the prenup and the postnup don't offset each other. They just kind of add that extra layer of protection, if I'm understanding correctly.
They would add, the postnup would probably reference the prenup and say, they entered into this, all, you know, all terms and conditions in that are, you know, effective here, but we're, you know, in a sense, we're sort of modifying and saying, yeah, but they can reference it, wouldn't alter it.
Got it. Thank you.
We do have a bunch of questions. So next one is, what level of financial disclosure has to be done?
Okay. You know, we do say that in both agreements that the parties have had a full and fair opportunity to examine the other one's finances. If there is any fraud, you know, or collusion or anything, the agreement will be deemed void. So if somebody says they have $1 million in assets, but they have 25 million, that could void out the agreement, because maybe you're okay with giving up $1 million, but maybe not 25 million, or you didn't realize that somebody has so much debt. So you are entitled to go through every scrap of paper that you want. You're entitled to do a full a full financial discovery. It's just that because it's not a court action, you can't order it. You can't subpoena anything because it's not actually a divorce.
Okay. Thank you. Another question is, what are your thoughts on the utilization of DAPTs for protection of marital assets from the other spouse?
And what's a DAPT?
DAPT, June? I didn't know myself, I assumed.
Oh, sorry. Hey, this is a domestic asset protection trust that's available in some states, about 19 of the 50.
Sure. Well, that is a way to state, if you're putting something in a trust, you are stating this is an asset that belongs to the beneficiary and it is not to be touched. But is the trust paying out a regular income? If so, that income will be considered for support purposes. So yeah, you might still need a pre or post nup.
But I'm sorry, I guess as a follow-up question, would it be able to protect the assets in a divorce, even though they're utilizing marital property?
Sure. If you have something in a trust, I mean, a trust should protect, the equity, the actual asset. I'm just talking about if this asset is paying out someone on a regular basis, that regular payout can be considered income. But yes, as that's the point of a trust, is to protect assets, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, next is a question from Marianne. She asks, if have pre or post nup, then file for divorce, can changes be made to the agreement? Also, does it have to be a legal document? What if a spouse presents a proposal directly to the other spouse before filing for divorce and accepts? Is this legally binding?
Okay, so it's not legally binding unless it's in writing, it's signed and notarized. There's that, with the acknowledgement. But look, two consenting adults can do whatever they want if they, verbally agree on something and then, they both agree to act on it. Great. But no, it's not something that you can take to the court. If you have a prenup, postnup, whatever, and then you have a divorce, yes, of course, you can always renegotiate terms during the divorce if you want to. But, and if things are amicable and you can do that, great. But if things are not amicable, if things are really awful, then at least you have a document that you can enforce and you have terms and conditions that you can enforce, such as what is my property and what is our property.
Thank you. This is from Marley. Do pre and post nups ever include an agreement that spouses will continue to work according to their capacities, barring unforeseen circumstances? I have seen a spouse quit a job, not to take care of kids, but to pursue a new profession or out of spite.
Okay. You can put anything you want to into the pre or post nup. What a court can enforce is a different thing. A court can't make somebody go to work. They just can't do it. I had a prenup where they agreed that neither one of them would gain more than 5% of their body weight from the date of marriage. And I was like, all right, we can put it in, but I mean, you expect a judge to say, hey, Patty, what do you get on this? I mean, what are you going to do? So you can state that. But again, if this person has someone that's left the workforce and it's not mutually agreed upon and they're not consenting to it, then you got to file for divorce and say, I don't consent to this action. And then in that case, the person who's left the workforce says, oh, look, I make zero. No, you don't, because we would be looking at 3 years of tax returns, say, this is what you're capable of making. And you are involuntarily, it's voluntary poverty. So no, you don't get away with it. But no, I mean, you can say that if, I will support your decision to leave the workforce if it is mutually agreed upon. If it's not mutually agreed upon, then I'm done.
Sense. Okay, we've got a couple more questions. Emily is asking, I've heard grumblings that post nups are difficult to enforce and I've heard lawyers discourage them.
No, absolutely not. It's a binding contract, just the way a prenup is, just the way a separation agreement is. Again, it is negotiated. Both parties should have an attorney representing them. It is executed before a notary. It is absolutely a valid contract. And if there is a divorce, that prenup, that postnup gets filed with the court, and it is an enforceable contract.
So you've
Great.
never heard that? You've never heard people say, I mean, I obviously, thank you. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly, right? I mean, it's a contract, but that is something I've heard a lot. I'm in New Jersey, if that matters.
I don't know why it would be discouraged. Again, it's a valid contract for everybody. I don't know why.
I think people have heard that the divorce, if the one of the parties is, arguing against the terms of the postnup, that you're basically starting from scratch anyway. So
Well, but that's up to then in that case, it should go to a judge, and a judge would say, no, you signed a postnuptial agreement,
so
we're
you've
not.
seen judges enforce the postnup.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's where maybe there's some confusion. If you hear on television, it's an ironclad prenup, that's nonsense, because everybody tries to dispute their prenups, and whatever. So, I mean, of course you can dispute it. Whether you'll actually get away with it, is a different question. How unfair is this postnup? Is it unconscionable? Is it unfair? Are you leaving this person in poverty? Then no, a judge might not enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, anything can be argued, right?
Mhm.
I mean, a
Anybody
divorce agreement
file
can
a
be
suit,
argued.
yeah.
I mean, so it's good. Like everything, it depends on the judge, right? But I don't know if that helps. Simone, I know you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. First of all, I came late, so I hope this is going to be taped, right?
Yes, it
Because
is.
it was great information. And I'm encouraging my NADP chapter to watch it as well. So when does the tape come out?
It'll be up by tomorrow. I can let you know.
Oh, perfect. So here's my question. I'm on the financial advisor side, so I just deal with the money. But, clients will talk to me, etc. You gave some examples of what a good way to broach this subject is for some key specific things. In general, it's not an easy one to say. If you have a client who's got an inheritance, I kind of went through this myself, and I've been married, as everybody knows here, for a really, really long time. But my brother and I inherited a house, and we created an LLC to keep it a separate marital asset, just so that it could pass to the kids, directly. But what do you find works or does not work in broaching this subject with clients?
Letting somebody else be the bad guy. So for
Okay.
instance, it was my broker at Morgan Stanley who said we should do this. And actually,
Excellent.
I might be
Great.
right.
Glad you're with it. Yeah, exactly.
I have no problems
Yeah.
being, throw me under the bus. That's absolutely fine.
Yep.
Because it is a very uncomfortable thing. But my broker said I should be doing these 3 things.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
It's the broker's idea, not yours.
Exactly. Perfect. That's
I
really
see-
helpful.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm glad. I see a question here. Is it important for both people to have representation? Could they come to me together? Yes. Anybody can go to a mediator, and they can, mediate a prenup, a postnup, a divorce, anything. Yes. However, one great way to challenge a marital agreement is to say, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have an attorney. She had an attorney. I didn't. I didn't know what I was whatever. I didn't really understand this. So I'm challenging it. I tell somebody who wants the marital agreement, pre, post, whatever, you should pay for that other person's attorney, because you're the one that wants it. And it's your insurance policy against someone trying to void it later on, that they didn't have an attorney. If they speak a different language, get an attorney that speaks in their native language, something like that, so that there can be no, I didn't know. I got finagled into this. I didn't really know what I was doing.
So Carolyn, just to follow up on that question, would you then confer, just in terms of me understanding the logistics, would you confer with that attorney directly, or would you just each work with your individual clients and then sort of submit
Each work with your own individual clients. I would not try to influence that other attorney.
I see.
And I see, do you ever include infidelity clauses? Again, what can you enforce and not enforce? You know, if you cheat on me, then, well, you know, fine. You can get a divorce for any reason. The person doesn't have to cheat on you, but, and we both agree that we won't cheat on each other. I mean, I think that's what you said up at the altar. I think you already made those promises to each other. I mean, you could put it in writing, but again, a judge will just say, all right, well, somebody cheated on you, get a divorce. Like, what do you want me to do about it? But again, if there's infidelity and there's money associated with that infidelity, yeah, then you have, kind of a solid claim.
Yeah, the weight thing is still fascinating. I'm still, is that a real thing? And somebody's going to ask someone not to gain weight? Wow. That's
They said that they were going to eat salads for dinner, like 3 days a week. They were going to go to the gym. It was like all this thing. I was like, okay, guys.
Do people ever include like not converting to a new religion and things like this? That also
No, you again, because can a court enforce you to go back to your other religion? That the religion comes in when you're raising children. If the children are born into a certain religion, now you're trying to convert them, or you're not, keeping kosher, or you're, whatever. That's something where a court can enforce things, but not for an adult.
Makes sense. Okay, I think we have one last question. Can you put language in a prenup where if the prenup is litigated against, the other party gives up rights to the asset?
No, but what I have in every agreement, whether it's a divorce agreement or not, is that if one party challenges the agreement, then that party and loses, then that party is responsible for the attorney's fees.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, Carolyn, wow, lots of great questions. Amazing presentation. Thank you. I'm going to give the CDS code now for CDS graduates, or Cybele, if you want to unmute and just, oh, here I have it. Post MMM 2025. So post MMM 2025. And as Liz mentioned in the beginning, we're going to break everybody out into a couple of breakout rooms to network with one another. And Liz will stay in the main room with any guests that are here, can learn about the NADP, learn about Liz and CDS program. We'd love for you to stay on and ask any questions you might have. I'm going to be in a breakout as well as Marianne. So Cybele's going to break us out now. And our introduction is what made you want to go into your field, whatever you is your profession. So we'll do that.
Thank you, everybody. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
And you're going to a breakout. So I'm not sure if you're with me and
Okay.
Marianne, so stay on. Thank you.